when you look at what the Chinese have done in this country, I mean, fentanyl, we're at over 200,000 killed in action on the streets of America by a drug designed and produced in China. And in the last year and a half, they've stuffed it with horse tranquilizer, a much stronger version to basically kill more of our society. They then introduce it to the Mexican cartels, and then the Mexican cartels use their counterparts in the various criminal organizations in this country, mainly MS-13, to basically put it out all over the street. We have over 200,000 dead Americans killed in action, I call it, and then that times probably 5 wounded in action, because there's been many that have been affected by it, and of course the damage to the families, the damage to our healthcare system, the damage to our education system, on and on and on. So that's one part of it, because that's kind of a physical manifestation of how the Chinese Communist Party, in their 100-year plan, which was actually developed by Mao Zedong in the late 40s into the early 50s, and that 100-year plan is 2049. That's why Xi has made himself basically dictator for life, so he can implement it and get it going before the 100 years. I mean, this is very real stuff. The other aspect that people need to understand is that the geology of the United States of America, particularly the contiguous 48 states, but even Alaska, we know of the energy resources in Alaska. But the geology of this country, this is one of the richest, most wealthiest pieces of dirt on the planet. Okay, we have all of the rare earth elements that you need to be able to function globally and certainly nationally. So things like lithium, copper, uranium, gold, and silver. I mean, that all of the different forms of energy that can be created, that comes out of the geology, versus that can be created by nuclear energy, and all the kinds of aspects that we have there. We have it for the next 500 years, Tim, for the rest of the world. So, when you're looking at something like that, and you have 1.6 billion people, right, in China, you got I think it's 1.4 in India. I mean, that's like a third of the planet right there, just 2 countries. Now, India, I'm a big fan of India. Big fan of how they operate and how they function. But a lot of people don't realize with India's military, it's a great military, and I know a lot of the leadership in the Indian military. India's military is primarily designed and supported by Russia. So you have these funny relationships out there. When we look at India and we think of Modi and we go, hey, he's a great guy, very pro-America, and he wants to be able to do the kinds of things because he's thinking of his own people, which is right. But you have to look at these other relationships. So there's all these relationships on the planet, and instead of us, to kind of use something I think I heard you say a long time ago, instead of actually having a leader, in this case Trump, going out there and interacting with other leaders on the planet and saying, okay, guys, how do we want to operate here? Because we don't want to try to kill each other. We don't want to go to war. That doesn't mean that there's not psychopathic, terrorist groups out there. There are, and I have dealt with them and faced them. But nation states, reasonable nation states, with reasonable leaders who are trying to do what's best for their people, they're going to. It's like a competitive environment. It's maybe it's a scrum. I don't know what you want to call it, what metaphor you want to use, but it's a competitive world. And instead of trying to kill each other over the resources or the kinds of things, maybe we figure out how can we actually live together. And a lot of that comes with smart people, engaging and talking and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. I mean, Trump's notion about taxes, as an example, and going with tariffs instead of taxes. I mean, just little things like that, because we're just giving away the farm. I was at a plant. Yesterday we were at a plant up in Ohio. Great friend of mine. We did an event up there, and they do these liners for the back of trucks. Something I never saw. And I said, so tell me which parts of it come from China, right? And there are still bits and pieces, but he was like so proud. And it's a mid-sized, maybe to a little bit higher than a mid-sized company. They do pretty good, but it's like the pride that he had in saying that, nope, here's this, here's that, This is made in some, somewhere America. This is made in Main Street. I mean, all the pieces. And he is fighting to keep that, and he's been fighting for 4 years to keep that, his prices to where it's reasonable, where other truck company clients will buy his liner for their damn trucks, right? Because the Chinese have a version that's about a third the price.
Oh, yeah. We deal with this. We launched skateboards. And when we were discussing with our distributors and the people working in the industry, they said, here's the Chinese option, and they're actually very well made. Yeah. And they're a lot cheaper. And here's the American version, also extremely well made. And they're more expensive. And I said, we buy American. We're not taking cheap Chinese products. I'm not doing this to line my pockets. But the issue is we have the ability to do so because I have the ability to invest. We have great members. And with their memberships, we have the ability to say, we're going to invest in what's right. For these other companies, they're struggling. Yep. They take a look at their options and they say, go with China so we can save as much money as possible. And all that does is weaken our economy and make it harder for this manufacturing base in this country to come back. So many of these, I'll put it this way. So many diners across this country do not use real butter. It's because the average person's not asking for it. And so when they walk in the diner, this one small family-owned diner says, we use hydrolyzed soy hydrogenated garbage because no one's complaining. But if we spend the extra $500 a month to use real butter, we can't compete with these other stores. And that just degrades everything to where we're eating poison, using cheap products, and giving away our labor force.
Yeah. I mean,
it's been a long-term plan.
Yeah.
The New World Order, I wrote my book on it, actually. My thesis work at college was on the New World Order. And it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a British plan. They were drawing this up in the 20s and 30s. They were talking about it. How do we basically turn the British Empire into the Commonwealth? Because we can't garrison an empire. That's what they realized with the Boer War, basically, right? They realized they couldn't garrison a quarter of the planet, which was under their control. They had to start giving the illusion of independence, which to this day they're still part of the Commonwealth. Australia, Canada, the King of England is still their king. It's the illusion of sovereignty. But they basically wanted to reincorporate America into the British Empire, and that's the will of Cecil Rhodes. And basically they pushed this agenda since the First World War, which we had no business getting involved with, but it was a financial war on behalf of J.P. Morgan.
You should drop your master's thesis on the internet. I swear to God.
No, it's online. It's a book. It's New World Order. It's on Amazon. People can read it. But essentially, to your point about the recruitment of the intellectual class, I mean, I focused on a guy named William Eliot, who was the teacher at Harvard for 40 years of Kissinger and Brzezinski and Huntington and all these guys who came through there. And Eliot, was trained by the Round Table groups of England in this ideology, right, which is globalism, as you say. And Kissinger goes on to open China with the intention of the Rockefellers, basically backing it to say, we want to, move financial capitalism, wants to go global. We want to deindustrialize America. We want America to be one cog within the global machine. We want you to be a weakened power, because when you're sovereign, as you know from war and anything, when you're sovereign, you have your own energy, you have your own industry, you feed yourself. You cannot be controlled the same way as when you depend upon your labor from, your labor or your goods or your products coming from another country. And this is all playing in, and whether it was drugs, whether it's the drug traffic, it's the arms traffic, it's the traffic in, you name it, humans, it's the traffic in cheap labor, it's the traffic in goods. It's all about this British imperial, merchant game, essentially, right? And finance capitalism being transnational. So the financier class, going back to the 100 years ago, they actually, if you look at the British Empire, a lot of these guys actually were the imperial, the Milners and others who were basically, financier class. They all embraced socialism. They understood that socialism essentially would give, basically it would create a system where you wouldn't be much of a middle class. You give the worker, give them just enough, right? Give them just enough to keep them happy. But you really have a small elite that rules it. And so the imperialists actually made a deal with this, essentially brought the socialist policy into their ideology. What they hated was the American system of Henry Ford and people like that saying, hey, I want my workers to have good wages because then they can buy my goods.
Be more productive.
And they can be more productive. They can buy my goods if they have good wages. So I always say it's the difference between the businessman and the banker. The banker doesn't care if you get paid well or not. He'll give you a line of credit, and you'll be a debt slave for the rest of your life.
Guys, the internet is down.
So that's it. Basically, it's the financier which wants you to be a debt slave, and the businessman that says, hey, I want you to have good wages so you can, be able to buy goods. And that's essentially, I think, the war that we're seeing in America between the Musks and the Trumps coming to saying, hey, we've got a problem in our country. Right. We're in 35 trillion debt. You're basically going to have to start selling our resources to pay this off. We cannot get out of this. And I think that was the wake-up call for a lot of the nationalists and the patriots coming together to say, we need to start making a move here against this globalist faction. Otherwise, there will be no America. And that's very quickly, I think, where we saw things going. And now the patriots have woken up and the dialogue, everything is changing. I mean, people are waking up to these things that I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's the essence. So what Sean Stone just said, that is the essence of what we have been facing for probably 50 years. I mean, as you said, it was post World War I when the New World Order as a coined term actually came into vogue. But that's what we've been facing. The speed, I think, turned up a bit when Obama was put into the presidency.
Yep, clearly.
Because he was a physical puppet of that.
Did you notice? Have you ever seen the LexisNexis data around terms like white privilege, diversity, equity, and inclusion? Mm-hmm. Around the late 2000s, every single media organization in the world saw an exponential increase in leftist woke ideological terminology. A lot of people will show the New York Times and the Washington Post and they'll say, look at this spike in this ideology in the United States. This proves it was the universities indoctrinating millennials who went to the workforce. And I say that's actually incorrect. It's social media platforms incentivized by advertisers and perhaps something else, perhaps something more nefarious, started algorithmically promoting a certain ideology to young people. And the reason why these terms were appearing in the media was because this is what the social media companies would promote. So if you worked for Huffington Post, for instance, and you read an article that said George W. Bush is great, or let's say it's 2008 and it's the election, if you write John McCain is good, you're not going to get shares. You're not going to make any money. You write Barack Obama is good, straight to the top. Facebook recommends it to everybody. You make $1 million. This created an advertisement and economic incentive, and I believe advertisers were largely driving this as well, where media companies were pushing this ideology intentionally. Or I should say not intentionally, but they were pushing it with the intent to share these terms because it made them money.
Right. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.